An aero design, check. A good consumer direct price, also check. And the ability to configure the parts and even the wheels the way you like them as part of the purchase process. Triple check. Fezzari is a consumer direct brand in Utah, and I've had this Veyo SL for nearly a year now. Been riding it, racing it, and in this video I want to tell you about my experiences with the bike and how it compares in terms of cost and ride feel and overall experience to others on the market, like this Trek Madone that I've had for a bit. The Veyo starts at $4,000 with Shimano's 12-speed 105 Di 2 group. I'll tell you about what this bike has and what it does not have. Please take a second to subscribe and hit the notification bell, and then we will dig into the Fezzari Veyo SL. Okay, first a bit of an overview on the specs and shaping. You can see the aero shaping for yourself, right? Truncated aerofoil tubing throughout, the drop seat stays, which are increasingly common on road bikes these days. The argument for these by Fezzari and others is that by moving the seat stays lower, you're giving a bit more flex and thus a bit more comfort than were the seat stays to come all the way up. The bike is a claimed 860 grams for the frame in a size medium. This is a size large. I weighed the bike as is, including with these Zipp 303 wheels, which are an upgrade, at just over 17 pounds or 8.07 kilograms. So not the absolute lightest aero bike on the market, but 860 grams for an aero frame with this much shaping is quite competitive. It comes in 5 sizes compared to 6, 7, 8 you can get from some other brands. The Geo is fairly straightforward. You've got a 73-degree head tube. You compare that to like a Tarmac is a 73.5. The Trek Amonda, Trek's race bike, is a 73.5. Most road race bikes are in that 73 to 73.5 range for a size 56. Of course, your fork rake figures into that head angle equation to spit out a trail number, which for this size 56 is a 57. So it is a race handling bike.
What up, Moose? Pretty cool.
So how does this feel? It feels like a race bike. Quick to handle, not sketchily so, but certainly coming off of different gravel bikes, it's much more nimble, more flickable. Acceleration's good. You've got 410 straight ahead race chainstays. Because of the mass in both the wheels and the frame, it's not the absolute snappiest thing out there. It's not going to feel like an Athos, but it's not designed to go up against an Athos. It's a aero road race bike, and I think put to a blind test, not that you would be sprinting blindfolded, but trying to feel the difference in acceleration of this bike, versus the Trek Madone or a Specialized Tarmac. I don't think I could tell the difference if all other things, touch points, variables like tire pressure, etc., if all that were the same, I don't think I could tell the difference. A lot of differences can be measured in a laboratory, right? Whether that's aerodynamic performance or a certain amount of flex here, which is how we as the bike world have decided to measure what comfort is, its compliance, or BB deflection, what we were calling power transfer efficiency. Those things can often, well, they can always be measured, right? But sometimes when you get to small differences, whether those differences can be detected by a human being, that's seldom the case. Some engineers will tell you that most regular riders can feel differences of 10% or greater. When it gets less than 10%, it takes a pretty finely tuned bicycle operator to know the difference. And once you get under 5%, then you're kidding yourself if you can tell that. I do not have a wind tunnel here. I do not have laboratory equipment to measure things, but just going on my gut and butt feel, bike feels like a good quality race bike. You know what I can absolutely feel though is my position on a bike, and just being able to easily dial in my position by specifying at the time of ordering, hey, can you guys put on a 120 stem, 42 bars, and then being able to just very easily in the old-fashioned way adjust height and angle while building it up. That makes the bike feel instantly like home. You get a saddle that you like. This particular model is not my favorite, but you get a saddle that you like in a position that you like. That is a huge majority of the battle towards a bike feeling great for you, especially for aerodynamics. Yes, this shaping does make a difference, and yes, you can measure differences in the wind tunnel, but the biggest part of aero is you, of course. So being able to get a position that is aero and comfortable and sustainable, you know, that's the main part of the battle. Since this is consumer direct, being able to pick the parts means you need to know, have a good idea of what you think those right sizes are ahead of time. Fezzari has a 23-point process where you can measure all your different parts, and there's little GIFs to help you understand how to measure. So the good folks there can help you get very close to a good position. You know, do you like aggressive? Do you like very relaxed? Do you like something in between? So they're there to help you for sure, but there are limitations of what can be done over the interwebs as opposed to going into a bike shop and having the same level of customization, but you can feel what the differences are right there before you purchase. So that's part of the trade-off of bike shop bike versus a consumer direct bike. We can't talk consumer direct bikes without talking about Canyon, right? The 800-pound gorilla in the consumer direct internet room. Canyon is leaning heavily into the integrated cockpit thing, which for a lot of people can work fine out of the box, but being able to specify length, width, and angle, this is not something you can do with Canyon. With Canyon, you order the complete bike, and if you want a different cockpit, you order that separately, and then it's up to you to figure out how to swap that cockpit. That's at least the arrangement in the US, may be different in other countries like Canyon's home of Germany. Rode this quite a bit in around Boulder, Colorado here, including in a road race that was a mix of paved roads and dirt roads. This Maxxis High Road 28 tires did not flat, not only in that event, but the entire time I've had this bicycle. So praises be for good sealant in a fairly heavy duty tire. Like these high road tires aren't the supplest, lightest feeling things in the world, but no flats for, you know, what, 9 months or so? Kudos. One thing to note with these Zipp 303S wheels is they've got a max pressure of 73 PSI. Not 70, not 75, but 73. That's because they're hookless and Zipp does not want your tires blowing off the wheels. As many of us are running wider tires now and lower pressures, that shouldn't be an issue, but just certainly something to be aware of if you like a narrower tire and like to run a higher pressure. It wasn't that long ago we had 23s and 25s we'd run at over 100 PSI. So just a point of note with these Zipp 303s. Keep the pressure low. I loaned this bike to two friends. One commented that this bike feels a little bit more confidence inspiring than his Scott Addict RC. Could be because he rides a slightly bigger bike. You know, he is normally on a 58, this is a 56. So a slightly smaller bike may have felt added to that sense of stability. He was impressed with it. Another friend liked how the bike felt, but couldn't get over how the saddle just wasn't a perfect fit. And that's, you know, brings up, get back to my original point of so much of how happy you are on a bike isn't about this, it's about what's going on up here and what's going on up here. And if that is all suited to setting you up in a happy place, then this stuff can really shine. But if you're arguing with your saddle, or you're feeling like you're too tight or too stretched out or too upright or too forward, whatever it is, if any of those things are off, this part doesn't matter. Again, that belabors the point of consumer direct. If you know what all that is, you're golden. If you don't know that, then perhaps a consumer direct bike is not for you. Now let's talk cost comparison. Veyo SL with Shimano 105 Di2 starts at $4,000, as shown here with the Zipp 303S is $4,800. Let's talk about a couple Trek Madones. The old iteration, the Gen 6 Trek Madone SL6 with 105 Di2 is just $100 more, $49.99. That weighs a claimed 8.7 kilos or 19.2 pounds in a size 56. The current generation Trek Madone SL6, the Generation 7, also with 105 12-speed Di2, and carbon wheels is $54.99 at a claimed 8.4 kilos or 18.52 pounds. A couple similarities. This comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Trek comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. You can specify the parts you want here, and I would suspect at most Trek dealers, if you want a slightly longer or shorter stem, they will probably be happy to help you with that. And you can get that done there in the shop, or you can feel it before you take the bike home with you. Scott's foil is $4,800 with metal synchros wheels. The Indonesian brand Polygon, which you can get in Australia and now in the US via the distributor Bikes Online, has an aero bike with Shimano 105 Di2, also for $4,000. That comes with its own carbon wheels as stock. That's the Helios A7X for $4,000 with 105. I've got a Helios A8X with Ultegra Di2 here in for test, and that is $4,600, and that comes with 50 mil carbon wheels stock. I looked for a comparable Canyon aero bike, the Aeroad. At least on the US site, there is no comparable bike with 105 Di2. They've got an Ultegra mechanical 11-speed version for about $4,000, but not quite an apples to apples comparison there. Now let's talk group comparisons within the Shimano family. 105 is the third tier down, right? You've got Dura-Ace, Ultegra, 105. All three of these now come in the 12-speed Di2, the semi-wireless configuration, where you've got batteries up here talking wirelessly to the back, and then you've got a single battery that drives both the derailleurs. As in the past with Shimano and also with SRAM, as you go down the tree, things get heavier and less expensive. The feeling is pretty darn similar, more so with the electronic 105 versus its higher end siblings than was the case with the mechanical versions. I found, again, years ago, 105 would start to wear out a little bit faster than would, Ultegra and Dura-Ace. Here again, you've got a difference in materials from the top end Dura-Ace as you go down, basically subbing in a lot more metal or glass composite over just straight carbon fiber throughout, but the feeling is quite similar, and most of the functionality is the same. You are missing a couple things, like you don't get the buttons on the top of the levers the way you do with Ultegra and Dura-Ace. Those buttons can be configured to do a number of different things, from different shifting configurations to driving the computer that you have. Another thing you don't get with 105 is the option to run the mammoth sized 5440 chainring combo. Outside of some high watt pushing professionals, you're really not going to see that set up on mini bikes. This is a 5034 compact crank, right? Kind of an odd choice for an aero bike, which ostensibly is all about speed, but good to have that option, and that's paired to an 1134 cassette, so you can get that Jeep gear, that 1-to-1 34 to 34, which feels pretty good for climbing. 105 also comes in a 5236, which is pretty much the standard for Shimano on race bikes across the board, and that's what I've got on personal bikes. The last big difference, at least in my mind, of 105 versus Ultegra and Dura-Ace in this latest 12-speed is you don't get the servo wave braking. What servo wave means is that initial pull of the lever brings the pads in closer more quickly than further down in the stroke, where you've got that fine adjustment modulation that makes the braking feel nice. It's not a night and day difference of servo wave versus non-servo wave. It's not like these feel bad or dangerous or anything like this, but it's just not as refined as the higher end Ultegra and Dura-Ace options. So in my mind and in my experience, this new 105 is a pretty darn good option. Doesn't have all the bells and whistles, has a bit more weight, doesn't have quite the sexy visuals as the Dura-Ace, but it feels pretty darn good. And, again, kind of like can you feel a 2% difference in drivetrain stiffness or bottom bracket stiffness? No. Could you feel the difference just putting your hands on these levers versus other levers, especially after riding for a while? I don't know if you could. So Shimano 105, Di2, good bang for the buck. Now, lastly, before a quick summary, let's talk about what the bike lacks. Does this name mean anything to you? I'm guessing probably not. Not that that's a negative thing, but Fezzari as a brand just doesn't have the emotional oomph that bigger brands that have invested a lot of money in sports marketing may have. Does this affect the quality of the ride? No, of course not. But I think branding and is something similar to aesthetics. Like, do you like how this bike looks or not? Do you have an affinity for the branding or not? That certainly figures into how many of us feel about our bikes, which is an important thing. Maybe not as important as how it physically feels under you, but Canyon in my mind is the one consumer direct brand to have successfully made that jump from being just price being its sales proposition to price and it being perceived by many folks as being a cool brand. Where you stand on this, not for me to say, but I think that's just one point to consider. Compared to Canyon, Fezzari, as mentioned, with the cockpit configuration, has a step up on the German brand. Of course, like being able to configure a cockpit or put on different gearing, different wheels is not earth-shattering. Bike shops have been doing this for decades, but it is notable for a consumer direct brand. As I mentioned, I like the 105 Shimano Di2 setup, and overall I was generally impressed with the fit and feel of this bike. There are a couple minor complaints, like the top cap would eventually work its way a little bit sideways. I've seen that with some other brands that have a shaped top cap instead of just a perfectly round option. Also, the hole for the cables to go in is a minor point of concern as far as water ingress getting down into the bearings, but two pretty minor complaints. Overall, I like how the bike rides. Paint scheme doesn't necessarily do it for me, it doesn't kill me either, and I generally appreciate the fact that I could tell them my cockpit measurements and have a bike arrive just so. So what do you think of this bike? What do you think of how it looks? What do you think of the value proposition? Maybe you've got a Fezzari already. If so, I'd love to read about your thoughts on the thing in the comments below. As always, I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you subscribing. And I'm here to tell you, it's a crazy world out there, so please be safe and make sure you take time to enjoy the ride.